So joining the conversation, we have Dr. Abigale Mupambi. She is the Global Affairs Analyst in Harare, Zimbabwe. And also Dr. Kasongo Chiputa, Political Analyst from Lusaka, Zambia, joining us to speak more on this. Thank you so much, gentleman and lady, for your time. All right, so let me begin with Dr. Chiputa. Let's begin with the midnight raid on an opposition residence that ended in gunfire, a dead former minister as well, and 11 high-profile detentions. President Hichilema said, calls this a preempted coup attempt involving foreign militias, while the opposition calls it a complete fabrication designed to crush dissent. So what do you call this? What evidence has the government presented to substantiate a claim as heavy as a foreign-backed coup?
Well, apart from those statements that there was a militia group in that house, that there were high-grade military weapons, that plans had been made, and the police inspector general has gone further to say that they had been watching them for the past 2 years. There is not much that the state has provided. We have just seen a video of the state broadcaster and a few other media houses that today went to that house where that incident happened, and they are showing inside the house. But this is something that happened last week. And in normal circumstances, one would have loved to see the state swiftly produce evidence, swiftly either admit or deny that the former minister had been killed. It took 5 days for the state to admit. Initially, they had denied. There was even mockery in some cases on social media about the whole incident. And today I heard on another platform for lawyers in Africa, a very prominent lawyer in Zambia, challenging everybody to produce evidence that the state had killed someone in that house. But this is after the state itself had admitted that, in fact, Honorable Kafwaya died in that shooting by the security forces in that home. So we are yet to see the evidence that the state has, the high-grade military weapons. We are yet to see all these other things. What we have seen, what I have seen now, about some of those who are called militia, particularly a retired military officer, is a photograph and a story. I don't know how true it is, but it's a story and a photograph in which that gentleman is with the Football Association of Zambia president, who is purported to have hired him to provide security to him. And the significant aspect of this is this, that the Football Association of Zambia president is a very prominent lawyer who had defended President Hichilema in many of the cases that our president had before he became president.
Okay, so let me come back to Dr. Mupambi, because a lot of people are asking, yes, nearly a week later, why has no independently verified evidence, come out, video, ballistics, or even a single credible witness outside either camp surfaced? And Dr. Chiputa talked about, them being surveilled for 2 years. So if the surveillance was real, why did they wait until election night of all nights to actually move in? Because now a former cabinet minister is dead. Amnesty International is also calling his killing deeply alarming and demanding a transparent probe. Dr. Mupambi, what does this tell you, that days later we still don't have an official account of how exactly he died? What does he say?
Thank you very much. It is sad. We saw it coming. I remember on this platform a few days before elections and even weeks before elections of Zambia, we actually flagged the indicators. Bloodshed did not start particularly on the night of elections. We saw the pre-election environment. It was actually culminating into this. And it is this is my first time for me to hear of a government that incubate a militia base for 2 years without doing anything except the night of elections. I want to believe that this statement is playing politics, buying in time. Probably the incumbent now President-elect Hakainde Hichilema, he may be trying to see how best to bounce back probably and stabilize the communities, which is what I think is key, because at the moment for them, it's no longer about what happened on the night. It's no longer, in my view, about what necessarily took place and preparing evidence. But the onus is within those who allege. Anyway, I don't think the opposition should approve anything. Probably they can proceed to clarify, but by now, government should have showed something that is a bit credible. And I think this is the dirtier side of politics. When we say politics is dirty, and the way sometimes it tends to frame issues. I'm sorry to say this. I think this is just a dirty politics because honestly, the brutality, the killings, there is evidence. Here is an opposition leader, a former minister, Kafwaya, who is dead. What else can they prove? We have seen people being abducted. We have seen a lot of torture. We have seen all this violence. We even saw probably a breakdown of the electoral system at one point, simply announcing that we're no longer counting, we are no longer proceeding, and that should have told you that something has been happening. But I think at the moment, President HH, he has to prove. President HH, I think he is focusing on consolidating the ground, considering he is now president-elect. I don't know whether to say congratulations, but I think he is now the president-elect. The onus is on him to stabilize the ground, account for every life. I think this is what matters at the moment for the people of Zambia, the economy of Zambia. At one point, all the shops were closed. People are under fear and there's tension everywhere. Opposition leaders, some are fleeing, some are hiding. So those are the issues. That incident is a mark. That night is a mark.
All right, that's actually an important statement you just raised, that the onus is on him to stabilize the country. Now let's come back to Dr. Chiputa, because Brian Mundubile had explicitly alleged that armed military personnel interfered during the vote count during the elections, asserting that military involvement during the vote count altered the final result. Now, Brian is avoiding police custody, under the protection of what's described only as a known international organization. We do not know who it is, but the UN chief, Volker Turk, has come out to, say that everything should be stable in the country. So what does it say about trust in Zambia's institutions right now, that an opposition leader feels safer with a foreign body than with his own police?
Well, that's a huge challenge that we are facing at this critical point in our history as a nation, particularly that it pertains to election results. It certainly does send fear because the police are not arresting people. The military are not arresting people. You just hear someone has disappeared. The government will deny. A few days later, you are told he is in the custody of the police. So we don't know who will disappear when. And those that were picked last week, including the musicians who were arrested a few days earlier. I think for now, perhaps we are beginning to hear that the musicians are being charged. Those musicians who were traveling with Brian Mundubile during the campaign, that they are being charged. But for those that were picked in the night of that incident, we are yet to hear what charges are being preferred against them. We are yet to hear when they will appear in court. But our laws do state that within 48 hours, someone must be presented before a court of law, or they should be given bail through a court, or they should be given police bond, depending on the charges. But then we do not know the charges. So the whole nation is waiting anxiously to understand what is it. However, the other issue is this, that Brian Mundubile and Makebi Zulu, both of them very prominent lawyers, are seeking the intervention of the court regarding, they are petitioning the court literally. They are petitioning the results, the presidential results. They feel that something must have gone wrong somewhere, and they have evidence, they claim, that they would like to present before the Constitutional Court, so that that court should be the one to determine whether or not they lost. So we are yet to hear how far that will go. But as you have rightly said, they are being kept somewhere safe by an international organization. We do not know how they will manage to file those papers, but of course they have there are various lawyers who may be able to assemble their documents and be able to present them before the courts of law. If they have not done that today, they may be able to successfully do that on Monday, because we are told the inauguration is set for Tuesday next week. So they have had just the last few days, plus Monday next, to file that petition. And so we are yet to hear whether that will be successfully petitioned or it will not be, because even their Secretary General has now been taken into custody. So really, it's a very complicated situation that we are having in the nation. The state is saying they have this evidence, they have all these high-grade military weapons and things like that, but we are yet to see those things. And the nation is anxious because the Zambians would like to move on with their lives, but in a stable environment, in a safe environment.
Okay. So now, let's, Dr. Mupambi, you know, because Hichilema actually built his political brand on being the reformer who ended the Lungu-era crackdowns. So how do you square that history with what's unfolding in Lusaka this week?
Well, President Hakainde Hichilema, his entry point into the political arena, particularly into the presidency, there was a motivation of democracy, a motivation of fairness. People really foresaw an environment that could have improved better from the PF government. But it is unfortunate that what is happening right now in Zambia, what you have witnessed in the pre-election era, is actually a point where history can actually turn. Zambia is known regionally, Zambia is known as a peaceful country that had witnessed the 7 presidents with the smooth transition, even the transition that happened between late President Lungu and the incumbent President Hakainde Hichilema. It was smooth. So I think that what is happening right now is actually tampering with the legacy brand of Zambia. And I think I appeal actually to President Hakainde Hichilema, now that he is the president-elect, whether circumstances are contested or not. I appeal that President Hakainde Hichilema do the honorable thing, tone down on issues of extreme handling of the opposition, extreme handling of the opposing voices. I know very well that there are already laws that were enacted also under contestations ahead of these elections. You are now president-elect. You have a legacy to protect. I think the history of Zambia has been prefaced under one Zambia, one nation. The region has been copying from Zambia, but alas, at the moment, we have dead bodies in Zambia. There is tension. We need President Hakainde Hichilema to take a real look at this juncture and restore the dignity of Zambia, the brand of Zambia, and the brand of Africa, particularly in questions of transition, question of election, and dealing with the democratic space.
Okay. So the Electoral Commission itself, you know, I know Dr. Chiputa did say earlier that Zambians would love to go back to their lives, but the Electoral Commission suspended vote counting for hours, you know, during the election, citing violence against polling staff and also stolen ballot papers. So before we even get to the raid, how much damage did that pause alone, you know, do to public confidence in the result? Dr. Chiputa?
Well, I think that is what raised the suspicions of the public, the suspicions of the international community. Because remember, literally all organs of the international community were here to monitor the elections. And when the elections were suspended for some time, and then the military moved into polling stations, in some cases, political cadres moved into polling stations. We do not know what happened when the counting was resumed some hours later. There are videos, there are pictures of discrepancies in the election results. The presidential candidate scores a certain number of votes in the same constituency. The parliamentary candidate scores far, far less, a difference of thousands of votes, and people asking questions. And then there were some ballot papers that were found thrown in drainages, that were found bent, that were found in all sorts of places after that stopping of counting. So that is what raised the suspicion of the opposition. That is what raised the suspicion of members of the public, the voters themselves. And they are still waiting for answers for those discrepancies.
All right. Now, Mundubile has, this is still for you, Dr. Chiputa. I'll come back to you, Dr. Mupambi, with this same question, because Mundubile has separately accused Tanzania of interfering in this election, a claim that Dar es Salaam has actually denied, right? So is there any evidence backing, that up, or is this rhetoric getting ahead of the facts, Dr. Chiputa?
Well, as far as I know, as far as I've seen and followed, I do not have any evidence that I can point to and say, yes, that claim is true. But then you see, those claims should then be contested in court, should then be asked for evidence in court. And that is what Zambians are anxiously waiting for, to see the opposition have their day in court, and then they produce such evidence, they prove such claims, and then they'll put the matter to rest.
All right, let's pass that same question to Dr. Mupambi. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank you so very much. I think that Brian Mundubile and the PF Pamos Alliance have a case, but I don't think their case is external. People can always have political parties, they've got their own alliances. I am sure even they themselves, they've got their own alliances. Their case, in my view, is within, unless otherwise there's something concrete that can actually be linked to Tanzania. I'm hearing this for the first time from such allegations, but I think those are real allegations. The case that the opposition in Zambia have actually, in my view, is concrete within the sovereign boundaries of Zambia, and they can sustain that particular case, considering that we saw evidence throughout. Even we saw some police force tear gassing the observer mission, the observers and the electoral officials, picking ballots. There's funny things have been happening in this election, and I think let they focus and build their case within the internal affairs, because most of the evidence from the during, even in the post is within that context. Unless otherwise, if it is really, really sustainable that they may build a case beyond borders, I really think that they must remain within the confines of their sovereign boundary, because this is where the real matters happened, and they can stand with that. And my fear is days are running out. Will they be able to file that, considering that they no longer want to come out of wherever they are? And I also wish that our leaders must also be brave enough to also go to the front line, not to risk their lives per se, but sometimes people don't want to be left alone. They must usher in leadership. During such moments, Zambians opposition constituencies seem to have been left alone, because most of the leaders, I want to believe, they are in hiding. But I think at the moment they have to come out, probably usher in the leadership. If they are petitioning, they do the petitioning, and I'm sure the international community is following, alliances are following. I think it is within their rights to do so.
Okay, now, Dr. Chiputa, let's ask a very, very important question, because 6 of the 11 detained include people directly tied to the opposition's inner circle, including the son-in-law of former President Edgar Lungu. So does that pattern look to you like a genuine security operation, or does it look like the state going after a specific political network?
Well, I cannot say that the state has a case or the state has no case. The apparent situation is that those people were found in the same place because probably, in my view, during an election, you constantly must caucus. You constantly must discuss. And remember, Brian Mundubile had issued a statement that pointed to the effect that perhaps they were leading in terms of the vote count. And that is what prompted the state to move in swiftly to send those troops who raided their house, who raided their home. So as to whether or not that raid and the kind of people were found in that house had anything to do with whatever it was the state was looking for, I think, in my view, perhaps some people within the government circles may have panicked, though President Hichilema was still leading. And I would wonder why people would have panicked just because someone made a statement, when in fact, President Hichilema was still leading and he was going to win the elections if that lead continued anyway. And so I wouldn't, I'm surprised that people did what they did and we lost a minister. But the unfortunate part was the denial first and foremost.
Yeah.
Only after 5 days, when the family challenged the courts of law through habeas corpus to produce Madam Kafwaya, challenged through the courts of law, government to produce her husband. That's when the state admitted that, in fact, he was the one who had been killed in that shooting. So the public remains highly suspicious of what really it was that the state were looking for. If indeed, like I said earlier, for 2 years they had been trailing them, why did they have to wait until election night and until Mundubile had made a statement? So that is what drills holes in the argument that the state is presenting.
All right. So just before we wrap up quickly, Dr. Mupambi, if neither side backs down, if Mundubile keeps rejecting the result and the government keeps pursuing insurrection charges, what does the next month look like for Zambia? Are we talking street protests, a court battle, or something more dangerous?
Yeah, I foresee.
In 1 minute, sorry, in 1 minute, because we're wrapping up.
Yes. I foresee a concoction of all of these things. I foresee court battles. I foresee a protest. Even most likely they may lose that particular court battle. Looking at the circumstances and the grounds, I see a legitimacy cost that is going to be cast, particularly on the incumbent. This is why I appeal that at the moment, President-elect, you are already President-elect. What is important is to unite the nation, be just and just account for all these occasions, because going forward, there has to be a social contract between the governors and the governed. It's not only about inauguration. There has to be a bond, a social contract, which is necessary for taking Zambia forward, for taking this region forward. I think honors now rest particularly with the incumbent President Hakainde Hichilema.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, gentleman and lady, for your time and for speaking so passionately, about this. Dr. Abigale Mupambi, a global analyst, and also we've had Dr. Kasongo Chiputa, political analyst as well. Thank you.